Ashley Gattuso. I am joined today by Mark Evans of Marketing Spark. He sends out a weekly newsletter by the same name, Marketing Spark. It arrives every week on Saturday morning, and his audience gobbles it up. We are here to talk today about what that newsletter means to his business, how he goes about creating it, and a little bit about the decisions that he makes and the processes he uses to deepen relationships with prospects and customers and people on that list. So welcome, Mark. Take it away. Tell us something about yourself. You call yourself a fractional CMO?
I'm a fractional CMO.
What does that mean?
It means that you can hire somebody with marketing experience and expertise without having to have them full-time. So if you're not sure you need a full-time marketing leader, but you need some marketing help, somebody to sort of help you guide you along the way to make sure you're making the right decisions and avoiding mistakes, then you can hire a person like me. And I work with companies in different ways. Sometimes it's a day a week or a couple of days a week. Sometimes they've got a project that they need some help on. And sometimes it's just advisory role where an entrepreneur needs somebody to talk to once a week to bounce ideas off.
So do you do more consulting work or execution of the idea work? It's
a combination of both. In some cases, it's on the consulting side where they need strategic advice and guidance, and sometimes they want me to get my hands dirty.
Good.
So it's that you're a consultant, and then they say, well, now what are you going to do? You've told us what to do. You've made all these recommendations. Now you got to help us make it happen. It's like, okay, I'll do that too. So it's a bit of a hybrid role.
So I'm excited for him to show us his newsletter. Explain first, before you go in, like what the goal of this newsletter is.
So the newsletter really is around building a personal profile and presence. So I want to be able to touch people every single week to remind them that here's what I'm doing, here's the value that I provide. And when you're thinking about marketing, you should maybe think about using my services, because we tend to move so quickly these days. We're frenetic from website to website, from platform to platform, and it's easy to forget. Like, even if you're good at what you do and people know you, they're so busy that when they're thinking about doing something, you don't come to mind. And that's the problem. That's why newsletters, I think, are so powerful.
If the particular algorithm of the moment isn't delivering that specific post that you made that day on LinkedIn, newsletter is a great way to ensure that it's going to be delivered.
Yeah, because we think that if we have an active presence on LinkedIn, for example, that we're omnipresent, that people see us all the time, and we're just one of thousands of people within their feed. So it's easy to disappear.
Yeah, I think of it, I was talking with someone the other day, and I think I wrote about it as, like, don't think of your email as the way, like, you have to kind of think of social sometimes, where it's like a billboard on a highway that people could just drive right by. And you want to make sure they like got your brand or your message or whatever you're putting out there, but because the email is like something delivered specifically to a person, and you should treat them like a friend that you were sending advice or ideas to. It becomes a one-to-one communication at that moment, which social, when done really well, can also do that and produce a lot of engagement. But I do love that you are harnessing the power of a platform that's not like going to see its peak and then die out anytime soon. Like, people aren't going to go delete their email app. They might unsubscribe from you if you wreck that relationship with their inbox.
When they do.
But they'll stick around. So show us the stuff. Show us the Marketing Spark.
Great. I'm going to let me share my screen, and I will.
Yeah. Is it letting you?
Not yet. I think you have to click on share screen.
Oh, you click share screen.
I'm going to click share screen.
Yes. And then you pick which one, or you pick desktop.
Here we go. That's what I'm going to show you. So you can see my screen right now with my newsletter?
I can. I got it.
Okay. Awesome. Okay. So this is what I do. I use a platform called MailerLite. I was formerly a MailChimp fan, but what I found is that as my subscriber base grew, MailChimp got increasingly expensive. And so I started looking at alternatives, and MailerLite has all the bells and whistles. It's feature rich. It's really easy to use, and it's not expensive. So I just moved over. It was super simple, and so I use them now.
So what is your list size at this
So
time?
so my list size is in around 1,600.
Okay.
It's modest, but the thing about email marketing is that it's, for me, it's not a quantity
Right.
kind of thing. It's a quality thing, and I'm trying to establish a relationship with the people that matter to me.
Mm-hmm.
And I probably should do a better job of promoting the email. We tend to get lost in doing things on LinkedIn or Twitter, that your email is always there. You kind of forget it from time to time, but I do recognize that it probably needs a little more TLC to push it out, because there is great value there, and it's another way for people to engage with me. So that's probably something on my list I have to focus on, is really promoting the email in a bigger way.
Yeah, yeah. I think some people are doing smart things. I'm trying it. I can't tell if I've seen results yet or not, by making that sign up page your URL
Right.
in your
Yeah.
profile, or some creative things like that. So that might be a way to go with that. So this is every Saturday. Why'd you pick Saturday?
It was a combination of sort of art and science. So I get to receive a lot of newsletters, which I'll show you some of the ones that I get, and most of them come during the week. And my inbox is full during the week. And I thought Saturday morning is a good chance for people to it's delivered by 8 o'clock Eastern. So it's you wake up, you get the coffee going. People obviously open their email, and unfortunately don't ignore it. And I want them to have the time to review without distractions. And it's just an easy way to sort of start your weekend. And we're so busy during the week that we don't have time to stop sometimes and read content. So I thought Saturday morning is the best way to do it. So the format has evolved, and I play around with different ideas. But what I've started to do is start off with a little message from me. It's a little bit of marketing wisdom or something that I've been thinking about. Sometimes it's thought provocative. Sometimes it's just sort of helping people explore new ideas. I try not to be too self-promotional, but I do have a podcast that I do once a week as well.
Okay.
And what I try to do is just put the spotlight on the person that I'm talking to, give a snippet of what the conversation was about, and then give them a link to the podcast.
Gotcha. I love that you start out with a personal message. I also enjoy that you are writing in a way that, we were not trained to write, right? Like one sentence or two sentences and a double space between, because I think that has a mobile edge that some people forget to have these days, is like, what is this going to look like on the phone? That actually makes it really easy to read.
And people
the next sentence.
And people don't like to work online. Everything has to be super simple. So when they see a wall of text, they're going to say, the first reaction is going to be, oh, this is going to be hard to read. I don't want to do it, right? So rule of thumb is to create the white space so that it looks easy and that it's accessible to people who want to get into it. So what I do in terms of content, and it ranges from newsletter to newsletter about how much content I'll share, how many items that I'll curate. But for the most part, I probably try to do between 6 and 10 marketing and sales related pieces of content. And it's just a little snippet, just a little glimpse of what the content's about. I read all the content that I curate. So there's lots of things I could say, but I'm just trying to keep it, again, super sweet and short so that you can get a sense of what the item's about. And then there's a link button that I found that I was linking to words in the descriptions, and somebody said to me, listen, when I'm on mobile, it's a little bit harder to do that, but just put a link button. So that's why I use the link button. The content, I try to make it around content that helps people actually get marketing done versus concepts and ideas, because a lot of the people that read my content, at least that I found from looking at the analytics, is that they're very interested in tactical insight. We're so busy doing what we do that they want to explore different ways of doing things, and marketing tools and approaches that are working. So for example, I've seen a lot of interest in how to use LinkedIn, efficiently, a lot of engagement. And the other one that's really interesting is anytime I talk about post an item about TikTok, there's a lot of activity on that as well.
Yeah.
So clearly marketers want to sort of move beyond what they're doing now, and they need insight, and that's what I try to do. And the second part of the email, it was what I call interesting, because I don't know, I'm trying to, maybe I should come up with a better title, but it's just things that I think are good reads that will give you a different perspective on your world aside from marketing, because we tend to focus on what we're focused on.
Right.
So if you're into marketing, all you do is read marketing content. And I think it's important to look at other things. So the items on this, for example, are 5 traits of excellent listeners. So that, whether it's your part of your personal life or professional, listening is a really important skill. So I thought, well, that's a really interesting link to provide. And the second link is looking at the story of Ben and Jerry's, the dynamic duo of ice cream, and how their partnership has lasted for probably 30, 40 years, and why they remain close friends. And I thought, there's a lot of entrepreneurs in my audience, and sometimes it's just interesting to show what it's like to be an entrepreneur and some of the relationships that you form along the way. So it's a combination of hardcore marketing and sales and things that I just sort of grabbed my attention.
Correct me if I'm wrong. Did you include something about Frito-Lay?
I did. Yep.
Okay.
Yes.
I'm glad my memory is not failing me right now. So that I clicked through and I read that story. Yeah, I thought that was fascinating.
Yeah, I think it's just stuff that just sort of jumps out of the page. And I'll show you some examples that are really just about, we're curious about lots of things. And I want people to be curious about other things other than marketing, because it's a whole big world out there. And maybe that's what people expect, maybe not, but I think it's a good approach to take.
I'm a marketer and my hobby is marketing.
Yeah, I know. Well, so am I. It's a vicious circle that we're in.
No, I think you're right that unfolding some outlying topics that might be interesting, especially entrepreneurial, like that sounds like it would be ideal for your audience, someone who needs a fractional CMO, who is probably thinking about entrepreneurship or looking for inspirational stories along those lines. That is the epitome of interesting to them.
Yep. So if you had to describe my approach to content curation, it's either a combination of ADD or freneticism to the nth degree. So I've watched some of your other newsletter videos, and people have these systems and spreadsheets, and I look at that and I go, man, people are so much better organized than me. Because I'm all over the place, but I'll give you a sort of a sense behind the scenes of what I do. So I use Feedly, and I've got it divided into a number of different categories: social media, startups, WordPress, marketing. So what I'll do every week is I'll either go look at it holistically and from just sort of the big picture, what are people writing about, or I'll take a deep dive into the marketing landscape. So I've got blogs like Advertising Age and Animals and Heinz Marketing, Marketing Prof. So all the, Seth Godin, all the sort of go-to marketing sites. And what I'm looking for is just things that are different. I don't like to do things around listicles or 5 things you should do. I'm looking for people who are focused on interesting approaches to marketing, or interesting ways to use tools and platforms. So again, going back to my interest in tactical execution and helping people explore different ways of doing their jobs better. So that's one way that I'll look for content and identify things that I find really interesting. And then just to bounce around a little bit, what I'll do is after I find content, I'll save everything to Pocket.
Okay, so you're going from Feedly to Pocket.
From Pocket. So I'm not sure it's the Beth methodology, whether it's the most efficient way to curate content. I've tried using things like text editor or Dropbox, Dropmark,
But to you, this is the filtration system, right?
This is the filtration system.
Right. It made it a Pocket.
So the things that I find interesting make it into Pocket.
Okay.
So that's sort of where it sits during the week, and I'm not actively trying to create the newsletter early in the week. I wait till later in the week to do it, because I want to get a sense of how many items do I have, and how many of those items, which ones are the best ones? Like, what do I think are the most interesting?
Right.
So that's another way.
What else is going to happen with Google, Facebook, and Instagram in the next 24 hours?
I would love to do it earlier in the week, so I'm less sort of scrambling at the end. But that's the way of the world, right?
Yeah.
So I use a number of different tools. A lot of it is newsletters to newsletters. So I subscribe to a lot of marketing newsletters or a lot of different services. One of them is, whoops, I'll have to refresh this for you. One of them is Nuzzle, which allows me to, it basically goes into my Facebook and my Twitter streams and pulls out marketing related content. So I can go into Nuzzle and it gives me a completely different view of the world. So it's just another way of filtering content that I might find interesting. So again, if I find items there in Nuzzle, then I'll save them to Pocket. You can do it right from Nuzzle. So that's another way of finding content. So this is, and again, I'm just bouncing around a little bit, but there's this newsletter that I read called Box of Amazing, it really is amazing. This is Raheem must spend an awful lot of time curating content, because in this item, he's got 20 items and they're all great. Every single item is interesting. He's all over the place in terms of the kind of content that he writes about. So for example, in this one, he has something on the rise of the digital despots. But he also talks about AI. He also talks about how the US hacked ISIS. So it's a lot of the items that I think that sort of go into my interesting category. I'll find stuff that's here, but he does talk about quirky marketing things, quirky stories. So it just gives me a different view of the world.
Okay.
And what I like about this newsletter, and I think this is some good advice for a lot of newsletter readers, is that it's a super simple format. I really like the way that he uses short pieces of text with links. He's got a nice introduction. This thing at the beginning, welcome. If you love Box Amazing, please forward this email or share this link. So he's really doing proactively trying to get people to promote his.
Right.
So I think that's important. We forget sometimes that your subscribers are probably the biggest advocates for your newsletter, and you really want them to encourage them to share the love, right? And make it easy for them to suggest your content to different people. So that's another item that I use.
Did you hear Russ Henneberry? Did you watch that episode?
I did not, unfortunately.
I'm so excited. Well, I'm very excited, and I'm just going to share this idea right here. I think it's like worth mentioning again. Is he calls like referral programs share magnets. And he said that of the types that they have used, that the strongest performing one has been the philanthropic one.
Interesting.
So it's like, share this with 2 of your friends. For every new subscriber, we'll donate X to nonprofit Y. And that those have really done really well. And I think that that's a really interesting way to go about it. So I'm just sharing that idea with you right now. Now we're on another curation software you're using. What is this?
So this is called Zest, and this is a plugin to Chrome. And so it's marketing focused. So whenever you open a new tab in Chrome, this will appear. At least this appears for me. And it's another way of really sort of finding content based on your interests. So on the right-hand side, you'll see that there's a bunch of categories. So B2B, blogging, growth, whatever you're interested in, Zest will show you. And this is all curated from other people. So people will submit their content to Zest, and then Zest will display it based on category. So it's another way of finding interesting content. And I'll dive into this content, open links that I find are interesting, and if they actually align with what I'm looking for, then again, I add them to Pocket. So it's another tool that I use.
So on a weekly basis, I know I'm interrupting and I'm sorry.
No worries.
On a weekly basis, how many things end up in Pocket before Saturdays send?
Probably 15 to 20.
Okay.
I try to not overwhelm my Pocket app, but it gives me enough content. Like I'm really trying to curate content along the way, and sometimes some content that I find interesting at the end of the day just gets pushed to the bottom, and then
Right.
it really is about what I find to see the most interesting.
Gotcha.
Twitter is also a really interesting app for me. I subscribe to a number of lists. One of them is called Marketing Gurus. So what I'll do is I'll just go through this particular list and really find some things that are sort of stand out for me. So it's just, they're all over the place: growth, tactics, marketing, Facebook, whatever. But again, right, when I'm looking for different ways to access content, there's just so much out there. And again, it's adding to my fanaticism. Like there really isn't a method to the madness here. I do bounce around all over the place. But again, right, the whole thing that I think is I'm just trying to find the easiest ways to go through a lot of content. There's probably better ways. I should probably watch more of your videos to see what people do. But for me, this is the way that I work. I tend to have a short attention span, so I bounce around a lot. So I just find it to be the most interesting to me.
I don't know. I find you fascinating because it's like opening a window to a brain, right? Like of what all the storage units of ideas must look like in there. And I think that people will relate to the fact that a curator's job is to kind of do the dirty work of checking in the different places to creating like the museum wall worthy collection.
Yeah,
right?
I think that's one of the things that that gets that isn't sort of recognized by a lot of people who read curated content, is that there's a lot of work that goes behind the scenes. So it's like a duck swimming on water, right? Like the duck looks like it's super calm and floating around, but underneath the water, its legs are moving like crazy. And that's what it feels like to curate a newsletter, is that you're looking at tons of content and you're just trying to do the best you can to find the most interesting. And people think, well, this must be super simple. You just go in and find content, but it takes time, but it's one of these things where the more you put into it, the more you get out of it.
Right.
There's lots of other things. I'm going to show you a bunch of stuff, but this is Marketing Brew. I love Marketing Brew, and I love all the other brew things. And these guys it's super smart. These guys are, again, right, I call these people curation pros, right? They've this is their business. This is what they do for a living. And, it's creative, it's interesting. I don't get a chance to read as much Marketing Brew as I want because it's just so much content they're producing. But again, right, if you're interested in good content around marketing, then Marketing Brew is something that you should think. So that's kind of like my style. Like I'm really looking for smart people who are also creating content. It's almost like it's a virtuous circle. Maybe I put it that way.
Right.
And sometimes what's interesting is that I'll find items and then I'll read some other newsletters and a couple weeks later and they're creating the same items. So there's must be a common mindset up there. That's like, there must be content that all of us collectively see and recognize as being really interesting. And I find that really fascinating that we're all on the same page to some degree.
Yes. And I think we're in an age where curation is its own skill. I remember thinking when everyone started blogging that eventually when I had children, because that was pre-children, now I have a 10-year-old, I remember thinking that the thing that we would have to teach them about the internet is how to determine if what they're reading is credible or not. And I think that plays into a curator's job, is to go, what is going to be interesting? What should I put in here that is like that is worth stopping the scroll,
right?
Or not going past, like, and so like if you were able to bring together helpful, interesting content, it saves that email recipient the job of doing it for themselves.
Yeah, I mean, that's the value. And part of the challenge in curating content is there's a lot of bad content out there. So there's a lot of
Yeah.
headlines that you think, this is really interesting, and then you click through and it's something that could have been produced by a freelancer in bulk, and that's frustrating because it's like, oh man, it's just
or it could have been written by an AI.
Or AI. I know. That's kind of scary to think about.
Write better than an AI, people.
Yeah. So there's time and effort involved.
Yeah.
And sometimes, the best way to find great content is actually go direct to the source. So there's a number of different go-to sites that I like to read on a regular basis. So for example, this is the OpenView blog, and what they do is actually they attract external writers for their blog. So it's not just internal people producing content, it's external sources as well. So there's a variety of content on this. A lot of it is very product focused. They have this methodology called like product focused marketing. So a lot of it is sort of almost a little too inside baseball because it's a particular slant, but there's lots of great content on this, and sometimes, and a lot of it is very tactical focused. So I'll go to that, or I might go directly to Fast Company. Fast Company to me is one of the best. I find it one of the most interesting places to find content because it's all over the place. Like for example, this item, Ricky Martin's new startup wants to remix your music to be more immersive. Well, chances are that I'll probably curate this item for my newsletter on Saturday because everybody loves Ricky Martin, although he's been out of the scene for a while.
Yes.
And he's obviously, a lot of, celebrities are getting into startups, and my audience probably tended to grow up a lot in the Ricky Martin era. So, it's just something that probably falls in the interesting category, but I mean, I can't resist Ricky Martin. So I'll probably.
I love it. I know I'm hearing songs that I'm trying to keep myself from, singing out loud on this recording for.
Yeah, well, you'll have an earworm about Ricky Martin for the rest of the day. I'm sorry about that.
It's okay.
So that's kind of the approach I take to what I do. And so I tend to I'll probably start the newsletter on a Thursday or Friday, sort of set things up. I've got a template that I use on a regular basis, and I start to sort of insert items as I go. And then probably Friday afternoon, I'll
get serious.
About it, start adding the items and get it ready. I tend to be a little bit paranoid about spelling mistakes and having the wrong links. So I'll spend quite a bit of time trying to go through to make sure that I haven't updated a link or I put the wrong link in, and because that is death for me when somebody pings me on Saturday morning and goes, that's the wrong link, or
are you using a template that you have to like clone or duplicate and then replace all the old content, or is it like empty and you add new?
I use a template that it just says use the template as the same email as last week. So it just creates a completely new version. Now it's the same content. I have to replace the content. It's not blank, which is sometimes you have to be careful about.
Right. I've been places before where old links have been used with new copy, or things like sneak their way back in, or it's like it's worse when it's transactional, right? Because it's like the CTA to the old landing page that offers the old price or something catastrophic like that. So I get the anxiety.
Yeah. One thing about the newsletter is that, and I watched one of your previous videos about the balance between offering value and being self-promotional. And that's an interesting balancing act because, at the end of the day, the newsletter is designed to help me capture the spotlight, help people recognize what I do, how I think, maybe position yourself as a thought leader or somebody who's trying to provide insight so that they'll eventually check you out. I mean, that's why we're doing anything really when it comes to professional, but I try not to push what I do too hard. I mean, my podcast is front and center because I think it offers value. And then at the bottom of the email, I'll give people, there's a section where they can connect me if they want to. But that's kind of the balancing act for anybody who creates a newsletter, is that you're doing it for a reason. Some people just do it because they're virtuous and they're good people, and some people do it because they want to drive their business. But you've got to take a very light approach, because then people will think you're just trying to promote yourself, and that's not why I do the newsletter.
Yes. So are you familiar with Donald Miller's story brand?
Absolutely. I'm a big fan of Donald Miller. Yeah.
I'm a big fan too. I struggle as I start to think about some of the things that I now feel strongly about that sometimes contradict what I feel like I learned in the story brand methodology. And one of those is something that you referenced earlier. You were talking about your white spaces and sentences. So I think I'll start off on a good foot, and he wouldn't disown me for saying that what you're doing with that kind of content at the beginning of your newsletter is you're not asking people to have to burn too many mental calories to digest what your message is, right? I do sometimes wobble when it comes to the theory of continually asking, like, do you want to get married? No? Okay. Do you want to date? Do you want to go on another date? You know, that kind of system. And I think that in particular email newsletters, that it really is like, let's just date. And then like at the end, like, if you ever want to get married, let me know.
Right. Right. Well, Donald Miller is obviously, he's a very smart guy. He's really.
He also says nobody wants to read your email newsletter.
Yeah, I think that's wrong. But I mean, he's a very smart marketer, and obviously he knows brand storytelling inside out.
Mm-hmm.
But he has a marketing machine. I mean, Donald Miller's job is to sell courses, to sell books, to get people to attend events, and that at the end of the day, that's his machine. And so he really amps it up. I mean, there's no doubt that you're facing, it's marketing, but it's also it's a full-blown sales effort. When you provide him with your email address, you're basically giving him permission to arguably go hardcore in terms of trying to sell you something. I mean, there is value there. I'm not arguing that, but
like the daily videos are great. Like that series is amazing.
And there's lots of free resources that he offers that you can totally take advantage of. But he's also trying to sell you stuff. So I mean, and we're all trying to sell things. It depends on your approach. I mean, some of us take a lighter approach, and some of us, we're pretty blatant about what we're doing. This is a business. I'm running a business, and I'll give you some free content, but at the end of the day, it's about conversions. Nothing wrong with that, but we all have our individual approaches.
Right. Well, I think when you put yourself in the mind frame of the recipient, if you're writing things that the persona you're trying to sell to will find interesting, you are not doing yourself a disservice by deepening that relationship. Like there should never be like a regret that they didn't eventually buy from you, but you should hone in on the people who are highly likely to buy for you and make sure that the content is really almost addictive to them in a way that they feel like it is something they need in their life.
Right.
Therefore, like you are something they need.
Like people have lots of options, and they subscribe to newsletters for a reason. Some of it is insight. Some of it is just being attached to a particular brand, trying to make their lives a little bit easier. So, but they are there for a reason. And if you stop providing value, then it's super easy to hit unsubscribe, is that you can leave. And that's when you're writing a newsletter, that's part of that pains me every time I look at my analytics and somebody's unsubscribed. It's like I can't help myself to sort of click in and say, who was that person, and say to myself, why did they unsubscribe? What did I do wrong? And sometimes, maybe your content changes, or sometimes people, there's always shiny new objects. There's always a new newsletter that you can subscribe to, and then you can only handle so many. But I think that, being very customer centric and being very, very reader centric and trying to think about the things that are interesting to them is the best way to avoid the unsubscribe. because you're always trying to be relevant to what their needs and interests are. And that's the goal. That's the ultimate goal when I'm trying to curate content is think about what they're interested in as much as what I'm interested in.
So here's a question that I don't think I've really asked to this degree to the people I'm interviewing. I'm learning as I go, right? Like this is a great mechanism for me to like learn what newsletter creators want and need and do, and how many tabs they have open at any given time. But do you have any stories? Can you share any personal, like, here is what happened as a result that I can attribute directly to, or as having been influenced by the commitment I have to creating and sending this newsletter?
So I would say that the newsletter isn't what I would call a lead generation machine. So
right.
It's not like I'm getting inundated every week by people saying, I love your newsletter. You seem to be super smart and I want to hire you. It doesn't work that way. What I do get from time to time is that people will say, well, I read your newsletter for a year or for the past 6 months, and I've been thinking about doing marketing, but the timing wasn't right. But I finally decided to connect with you. And so what I'm trying to do with people is build a relationship. I may never talk to them. They may never talk to me, but every week, as we said when we started the conversation, is every week I'm touching them. I'm reminding them that here's how I think, here's what I do. If you ever want to think about doing marketing, maybe you'll consider me to be one of your options. And so I think it's almost like soft selling, like you're, in a sense that, and I'm a big believer in soft selling. I think that you just have conversations with people and listen to what they're thinking and what they want, and then you can instead of telling them what they should do. And so I think that's the thing with the newsletter. It's hard to tell the ROI from a business perspective. It's impossible, but it's just a belief that what I'm doing is the right thing for my business. And you think about as an entrepreneur, you've only got so much time on your hands and so much energy. So you have to figure out where do you invest your time and energy. And for me, a newsletter is part of that. I launched a podcast about 3 months ago, and so I've decided, okay, I'm going to allocate some of my time to my podcast. And then something has to give. Like, I don't blog as much as I used to. I don't know whether that's a good or bad thing, but it's just a matter of how many balls you can juggle at one time.
So here's a good question, because you consult with teams that are considering what marketing efforts might work for them. And I've been thinking about this as a tactic that teams might find helpful. When you are marketing, you need to get in the head of who you are sending something to, right? Like, you need to know your audience. You need to talk to customers. You need to do all of this list of things that help you understand where your messaging is failing and how to make it stronger and forge better connections, right? Especially if you are not the thought leader in that industry that you're marketing to, and you need to learn it. Like, I come from a journalism background. We're great at becoming a quick expert in a new topic, right? Like that's part of your job. But so I've been thinking that marketing teams, or even non-marketing teams, like the entrepreneur who needs to understand their customer, would benefit well in two ways from sending out their own curated newsletter. And I think this because I think as a team or as a business or even a solopreneur, if you are constantly looking at what your audience might find interesting, then you're staying on the pulse, just like a beat reporter whose topic is this, sports team or this particular political topic or something. If you stay on the pulse of it, then you're getting into the headspace. If you're working as a team and you're sharing links with each other in like a Pocket or whatever you're using as a communal thing, and then putting that out, even if it was an internal newsletter, then you're saying like, hey, this is what is important. Like my target audience used to be church communicators. this is what is important to church communicators right now. It came out in this paper and this story, and like, here are the things they are talking about in Facebook groups. Here are the things they are doing here. I think that it can have a dual purpose, not just being an internal newsletter, but being something that goes out to your audience, and it just kind of grows your understanding of that audience because you have challenged yourself to understand them better.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, one of the reasons I started writing a newsletter is there was a marketer whose name escapes me, who every Saturday he had a blog post with the links that he found interesting. Mm-hmm. And then I started doing that on my own blog. And then I thought, well, maybe there's a better way to do that. And that's why I rallied around a newsletter. But yeah, I mean, I think part of it is that within marketing teams, people have different interests. And they allocate different amounts of time to reading content. So, but all of that content could be really valuable. And actually, now that I think about it, the idea of an internal newsletter would be really interesting as a way to make your team smarter, more insightful, mm-hmm. open them up to new ideas and new possibilities. And maybe that's the way to start for a lot of marketing teams, is maybe they sort of take a baby step by doing an internal newsletter. Mm-hmm. And if they think the content is good enough and offers enough value, then they could possibly launch a public curated newsletter. Mm-hmm. They could combine that with some of their own marketing, some of the things that they're doing internally, to sort of almost have a hybrid approach. I mean, there's lots of different ways to do it.
Oh yeah, you could align sales and marketing this way.
Exactly. And so, I mean, I think that the part of the challenge with newsletters is there's so many newsletters.
Right.
And a lot of people and companies are a little bit intimidated. Why does the world need another newsletter? And I think there's always room for another newsletter, just as there's always room for another podcast. That mm-hmm. there's no reason why you can't jump on the bandwagon, because your newsletter could be different, better, more interesting. I mean, all the different, there's always new brands and new products that can emerge on the scene. And there's no reason to not do it because everybody else is doing it.
Right. I mean, it was a no-brainer kind of strategy to me when I came into Curated, that a newsletter platform that helps you create curated newsletters needed a curated newsletter about newsletters.
Right. That's way to look at it. Yeah, so
it's like Peter Piper.
Exactly. I mean, I think there's a lot of talk these days about podcasts, and that why would everyone's jumping on the podcast bandwagon, mm-hmm. and it's too late. But when you think about it, there's only 1 million podcasts, and it's not too late. It's actually early days.
Oh, so newsflash, this recording, I think it's great because it's screen share and people can look and see your process, but we will likely be also delivering it out or scaling this content as a podcast as well. So I will keep you posted when that happens. I guess further newsletter topics and questions, did you have anything else that you wanted to add, advice to people who are either kind of struggling with their newsletter or are thinking about starting one? We can maybe stop the screen share unless you have another tab that you want to show us.
No, that's that.
You went through all of them? I've been enjoying the Ricky view. I've been enjoying the Ricky.
I think
you just click the red X somewhere where it says screen share.
Stop share.
There you go.
All right, awesome. So I mean, I think one of the things with the newsletter is look at your analytics. Like if you're doing a curated newsletter, mm-hmm. one of the things you need to think about, it's just not about you and what you're interested in, it's about your audience. So I spend a lot of time looking at what are the most clicked items in my curated newsletter. What are people interested in? What are they not interested in? So there are times when I get excited about particular topics, or particular types of stories, and I'll start posting them on a regular basis, and they get absolutely no engagement. People aren't interested.
Right.
It's a little bit disconcerting to me because I'm super interested in them, but again, right, you're really trying to serve your audience, and so you don't want to feed them, like it's almost like you don't want to give them what they tell you want. Sometimes you have to give them what's unexpected.
They don't know. They didn't.
Or what they don't know, but at the same time, you got to feed the beast, right? And if the beast wants to eat a particular type of food, then that's a good way of keeping your audience engaged. And then what you can do is you can slip in some of these other items that you find interesting, but you're not trying to force them to mm-hmm. your diet is not all about forcing them to eat what you want, right?
Yes. So I've been thinking about this a little bit. And I think that there also has to be like some nuance taken into account when the commentary about the link makes it so that you have written enough that they do not click that link. Like, so like you have like Morning Brew and some other publications that consider it their job to keep you, like there's a focus on keeping you in the email because it can tell you everything, all the places they could
Right.
send you to go. So there might be even people, I've seen sections of newsletters that like, obviously that didn't get a lot of clicks, but the content was heavy. Like there was like 2 or 3 paragraphs of commentary about the article versus the quick, like in your section that has sentence link,
Right.
like teaser link instead
Right.
of full commentary. So I think you have to think through that as well.
That's interesting because I've tried both approaches.
Uh-huh.
One of the newsletters that I showed you, Box of Amazing. I mean, he does an amazing job of having snippet link, snippet link. So there's enough for you to be curious and enough so that you'll click through the link. And I want people to click on the links. When I
Mm-hmm.
don't see clicks, then that means I haven't done my job properly.
Okay.
That the items that I've picked or the descriptions that I've used haven't been effective, and
Mm-hmm.
that in a sense I failed, or that people just are super busy that week,
Or that you're learning what they don't like.
or learning what they don't like.
I like
So,
that. I like thinking of anything that doesn't work as just like a lesson.
and the other reality is that it's people read and don't read for a number of reasons. Like this weekend, for example, it's Canadian Thanksgiving. So a lot of people are going to be going to their cottages or spending time with family. Are they going to read your newsletter? Maybe not. So you have to sort of also be aware of the fact that
Mm-hmm.
there's a time and place for newsletters. When it's warm outside in the summer, we have 2 months of summer. People are outside, and when it's cold for 6 months, then people will read your newsletter more often. So there's lots of
Mm-hmm.
different variables that to gauge your readership's engagement. But yeah, it's an ups and down kind of thing. I mean, curated newsletter, sometimes you're on and sometimes you're not. And I think my advice to a lot of people is just keep going. Like if you think it's
Mm-hmm.
important and think about it, you're part of your marketing mix, keep doing it.
Like consistently show up for those people who said they wanted you to be there.
Right.
Right.
Exactly.
I think maybe what I'm stumbling on in my mind is that I had one more thing to say about metrics and what you're looking at. I feel like it would be good to talk about when you first launch metrics versus when you've been sending for a while and as your audience grows and how you see those things sort of change, because that initial launch list is probably going to be like people who knew you before you launched the newsletter.
Yeah, I mean, I think the thing about metrics is that in the initial days, the metrics aren't important. It really is focused
Mm-hmm.
on creating great content, valuable content. And as you go, obviously, you want to watch your subscribers. You want to see how many people are subscribing. You want to promote your newsletter to make sure you get the numbers up. You want to look at clicks, whether people are clicking through on your newsletter and the items that they're clicking through. But I think the metrics for a lot of curated newsletters is really like just focus on doing great content, and the rest will pan out. If people want to check out the newsletter, they can
Yes.
go to marketingspark.co/newsletter and sign up. It's once a week. It's an easy read. Check it out. If you like it, that's great.
We will link in the YouTube comments, in the description, to Marketing Spark, the newsletter sign up, the podcast, any other URLs you'd like people to follow?
No,
LinkedIn, maybe?
LinkedIn as well. Yep, I'm
Okay.
all over LinkedIn. I publish a lot of content on LinkedIn. But yeah, I got to jump. But
Okay, excellent. We'll stop recording and I'll say goodbye.